Now, I know some people will actually add in, when they're trying to revive their soil, they'll add in like a peat or cocoa. Some people will add in like aeration. And then other folks will actually also inoculate with microbes. I noticed we didn't talk about any of that here in this particular case. So would you advise against adding in peat, for example, or some form of aeration, whether it be perlite or any of the other aeration points, and then inoculate them with microbes? I know you didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah, great. So those are two other. Yeah, so I mean, the reason we haven't talked about it is because we're looking at a soil nutrient analysis, and none of those things will change the nutrients or balance the nutrients. But that's not to say that they're not important or recommended. I would let's talk about peat and aggregates first. Those change the physical properties of the soil, not that they're inert. So chemically, they have very little influence on the soil chemistry, especially when you're applying them to topsoil. They're not providing nutrients, and peat might have a light downward pressure on the pH, but in your soil, won't do anything. The purpose of them is to improve the structure, the aeration capabilities of the soil and the drainage capacity and things like that. So in certain instances, in your case, it may be one, like just getting a better physical tilth may be very nice, and it may benefit the plants tremendously. I mean, peat moss, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, peat bogs are a big impact. So when we use peat moss, we just need to be aware that like that's a resource in someone else's backyard that we're mining, and it has an impact, but it performs extremely well. So I love peat moss. I think it's great. It's going to loosen the soil. Peat moss has this interesting characteristic where it both kind of loosens and aerates the soil, but it also holds water well. So that's why peat moss works so well. So incorporating things like that in a topsoil, really in a small environment can work. Once you get larger than even a few hundred square feet, it gets very expensive for the benefit you get. I don't generally recommend adding aggregate to a topsoil. I would say carbon-based aeration sources, so cocoa and peat, are much better. The only time I'm ever thinking about aeration is in an engineered media, like a peat-based potting soil for indoor production, or when you're growing in pots or raised beds. I think that's fine. When it comes to microbes, so microbes, the role of microbes is to cycle nutrients that are already in the soil. So personally, I have a philosophy that if you use carbon-based inputs and you grow living roots and you irrigate really well, you keep consistent soil moisture, and you have a consistent flow of carbon through your soil system in all different forms, from molasses to wood chips and everything in between. Over time, the microbial community can get very healthy. And so I inoculate at planting. Every plant I put in the ground, I do a dry pelleted mycorrhizal inoculant and a root dip in a full spectrum bacterial inoculant. And then I just let the indigenous microorganisms sort of run their course, and I just try to feed, cover crop, I irrigate, I do all the things I can to just feed the microbes, and that's my only inoculation. But people do it different. People brew teas. People will create ferments, which is really sort of, you're getting the microbial byproducts more than the microbes themselves. So yeah, I mean, you can kind of be pushing microbes through the season, and that's definitely going to help. But long term, I think the best thing you can do is just treat your soil well and constantly be feeding carbon sources into your soil.
This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrowIt15 to save on any of their products.